My name is Penelope. I am 33 years old, and I have been working remotely for several years now, accustomed to a secluded but quite comfortable life where the main communication takes place through a computer screen, and the boundaries between work and leisure are gradually blurring. Now I live in my parents' house, in a spacious but slightly old building filled with childhood memories and familiar, cozy smells of homemade cakes, freshly brewed coffee, and the light scent of lavender that my mother likes to spray in the living room. Here I manage my daily duties, trying to keep order, help my parents, and combine work with my usual routine, which, however, does not seem too burdensome to me. I am free, and although at my age many have already got families, children, and joint plans for the future, I am still satisfied with my lifestyle. Family has always remained an important part of my world for me. My parents, friendly and caring, my brother, who is a year younger than me, and his wife Lucinda, with whom we surprisingly found common ground almost immediately after their wedding. She married my brother a year ago, and I always assumed that they were happy together, enjoying a new stage in their lives, but lately it seemed to me that something had changed, because Lucinda began to come to our house more often, staying longer than usual. By the way, this house once belonged to her relatives, so at first I thought she might feel uncomfortable coming back here, but she seemed completely comfortable. Unlike me, who sometimes found myself feeling awkward and a little confused around her. Lucinda always gave the impression of a confident, well-groomed and feminine woman, to whom the eye was involuntarily attracted. She had lightness in her movements, natural grace. She spoke calmly, measured, but there was a soft, almost hypnotic intonation in her voice that could endear anyone to her. She knew how to make me feel like a sister, as if we had known each other not for a year, but for a lifetime. One day, during one of her visits, she seemingly accidentally asked me a question that made me think. She asked why I still didn't have a boyfriend, and then added if I felt uncomfortable in the presence of men. Her tone was friendly, without a hint of mockery or judgment, rather curious, but at the same time attentive, as if she really wanted to understand me. I was a little embarrassed, but I honestly explained that my remote work significantly reduces the opportunities to meet new people, and since I rarely attend social events, I simply don't have a chance to meet someone special. Lucinda listened to me attentively, without interrupting, and when I stopped talking, she nodded, as if understanding my words more deeply than I did myself. Then, with a slight smile, she offered me some advice, nothing intrusive, just recommendations that could help me feel more confident. She talked about makeup, how small touches can accentuate natural beauty, and a style of clothing that can create a certain impression, even if you are in a familiar environment. There was genuine concern in her voice, and it was nice. Someone really wanted me to feel good. I thought about her words. Of course, I've always preferred comfortable clothes and minimal self-care, because working from home, you rarely think about how you look. Most of the time, I wore a bandana to keep my hair out of my face, especially while working, and it seemed to me that it was just practical. I rarely used makeup, mostly just to moisturize my skin, and to be honest, I didn't consider it a problem. When special occasions arose, such as my brother's wedding or other important family events, I, of course, tried to look appropriate. I chose an outfit, did my hair, applied makeup, but in everyday life it seemed to me that it was unnecessary. Listening to Lucinda, I suddenly realized that I might be missing something important. She didn't try to impose her opinion on me, but her words made me think about how much appearance can affect not only the perception of others, but also the inner state. After all, self-confidence is not just a matter of comfortable clothes or makeup, it is a feeling of your own attractiveness, even when no one sees you. I was a little surprised by how easily Lucinda took the initiative into her own hands, without the slightest doubt or hesitation, as if it was something she took for granted, as if she had long ago decided for herself that my life needed changes, and it was she who should organize them. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and although at first I wanted to object, to say that I was fine with my style on my own, that I was comfortable with what I was wearing, I still let her take over, more out of curiosity than out of a real desire to change something. She confidently stepped into my room without waiting for permission, and immediately went to the closet, easily opened the doors and began to carefully examine its contents, running her thin fingers over the fabrics, assessing the color palette, style, and combinations of things. I hesitated, feeling slightly embarrassed, but seeing her genuine interest, I decided not to interfere. After all, what's the big deal? These are just things, and Lucinda clearly wasn't going to criticize me. Rather, on the contrary, she genuinely wanted to help. She sorted through the clothes, commenting on each find, then admiring the quality of the fabrics, then noting the stylish details, and soon, judging by the expression on her face, I realized that she was really impressed. "Wow, I didn't expect you to have such beautiful clothes," she exclaimed with genuine delight, taking out one of my favorite dresses and holding it to herself, appreciating the style. "And your cosmetics are top-notch. I always thought that the brands you choose are too expensive, but now I realize that you know a lot about quality." I felt a surge of pride. It's still nice to have your taste appreciated. "I choose my cosmetics carefully," I explained, a little defensively. "I have sensitive skin, so I had to experiment for a long time before I found the products that really suit me." Lucinda nodded, but I noticed a slight surprise in her eyes, as if for the first time she saw me from a different side, as if she had previously considered me indifferent to these things. "It's a relief, but it looks like you rarely use them," she remarked with a slight note of reproach. "You don't go out much, do you?" I shrugged, acknowledging the truth. "Yes, to be honest, almost never. Only if there is a special occasion." She frowned, clearly displeased with this answer. "That won't do," she declared with sudden determination. "Next time I see you, I'll teach you a few makeup techniques. You'd be surprised how much it can change the way you perceive yourself." I wasn't sure if I wanted to learn these techniques, but I didn't argue. It's better to try it once than regret not giving myself the chance. Meanwhile, Lucinda continued sorting through things, enthusiastically making possible combinations, discussing which styles suit me better and which ones don't emphasize my advantages too much. She seemed to get excited, and by evening my room looked more like a battlefield. Clothes were scattered everywhere, cosmetics were taken out of drawers and neatly laid out on the dressing table, and Lucinda herself, finally realizing the scale of the chaos, smiled guiltily. "Oh, I think I got carried away," she muttered, looking at me guiltily. "It's time to stop," I suggested with a slight smile, but deep down I was grateful to her for this day. She agreed, but before she left, she summed up her analysis. "You know, you don't need to buy anything new at all, you already have everything to look amazing. All that remains is to start using it." I nodded, but I couldn't help thinking that something about her behavior remained a mystery to me. Her frequent visits, this involvement in my life, was it just a sincere friendly desire to help, or was there something more behind it? I have often wondered why Lucinda comes to us so often, why she spends so much time with us, because it would be more logical to assume that a young wife should be busy with her own family, her worries, maybe planning children, work, or just enjoying married life. But if she turns up with us almost every day, maybe it means that everything is not so smooth between her and my brother? The thought bothered me, but I didn't know how to ask her directly. Meanwhile, my parents didn't seem to see any problem with this. On the contrary, they enjoyed her presence, treating her like their own daughter, and this was in stark contrast to my cautious, somewhat puzzled attitude. "Isn't it great that Penelope has an older sister now?" Mom said with a smile, looking at us. "We look forward to Lucinda giving you makeup lessons next time," my father added with a good-natured laugh, but there was a slight note of caution in his voice. "Penelope shouldn't rely too much on Lucinda," he remarked, and I wondered what he meant. I nodded in agreement, but conflicting feelings were fighting inside me. On the one hand, I didn't want to offend Lucinda, because, in fact, all her initiatives were well-intentioned, and on the other, I had never asked her for such services and certainly did not plan to devote my time to mastering makeup, which didn't play a major role in my life. My work took up almost all my time, and I preferred to spend my free hours in peace and solitude, reading books or doing things that brought me real pleasure. Prioritizing romance, appearance, or fashion trends didn't seem too important to me, especially since my life was set up very differently from Lucinda's, for whom beauty and style seemed to be an integral part of her personality. She loved spontaneity, unexpected ideas, and the ease with which you can change something in your lifestyle or life, whereas I was used to regularity, thoughtful decisions, and the comfort of a familiar rhythm. Her offer to teach me makeup techniques was entirely her own initiative, not a response to my request, and as often happened, I once again found myself caught up in the maelstrom of her designs. My parents perceived it completely differently. For them, Lucinda was caring and attentive, and they regarded her desire to involve me in the world of beauty and femininity as support, as friendly mentoring, which, in their opinion, I lacked so much. Sometimes I wish she would take more account of my need for personal space, especially considering that I work from home and rarely feel like venturing outside my secluded world. But I couldn't tell her that directly. I felt uncomfortable rejecting her ideas, because they carried only good things in them, even if it seemed to me that they didn't quite suit me. I didn't want to tell my parents about this either. They were happy to see how Lucinda was involving me in her life, and they didn't seem to notice at all that at times I felt overwhelmed by her attention. When she left, I went back to my room to put away all the clothes she had pulled out of my closet in a fit of enthusiasm. I methodically folded my things, carefully hung them on hangers, trying to put in order the chaos left after her visit. However, when most of the clothes had already found their place, I suddenly realized that I couldn't find my favorite sweater, warm, soft, caramel beige, which I bought just a year ago and which still looked like new. Wait. Where's my sweater? I muttered, peering at the shelves of the closet, but in vain. A feeling of irritation crept into me. I knew for sure that I hadn't thrown it away, and anyway, when I update my wardrobe, I always carefully monitor which items are sent to charity, which remain, and which deserve a special place in my closet. This sweater was too beloved, too comfortable for me to part with it. His absence from the rest of the things suddenly seemed inexplicably significant to me, especially in light of the events of that day. I tried to remember the last time I saw him, and I came to the conclusion that no one had touched him since Lucinda went through my closet. Fragments of memories surfaced: how I went out into the living room to ask my parents to make tea and snacks, how I left Lucinda alone in her room, and how she brought with her a bulky bag that could hold anything. But even with these suspicions, it seemed silly and inappropriate to immediately accuse Lucinda of theft, because I had no evidence, and the voice of reason told me that it would be simply incredible. However, the feeling of anxiety did not disappear, and I decided that I did not want to find myself in a similar situation again, feeling helpless and insecure about what was happening in my own home. That's why a month later, anticipating Lucinda's next visit, I decided to take preventive measures. I bought a small hidden camera that could be installed unnoticed in the room. It seemed a bit excessive, but I needed to make sure that my suspicions were unfounded or, conversely, confirm them. As expected, Lucinda entered the house with the same relaxed confidence she always showed up at our place. She announced with a smile that we were going to have a makeup lesson today, and before I could say anything, she was already heading to my closet to get the right things to create the perfect look. Then, armed with my favorite makeup tools, she set me down right on the carpet, surrounded by numerous brushes, palettes, and jars of foundation, as well as her own collection of cosmetics, which she brought with her. "Okay, let's start with the basics," she said cheerfully, opening the powder case and deftly collecting some on a fluffy brush. I looked at her, trying to smile, but worry was growing inside me. This time, I decided to be careful, and if something disappears again, I will know the truth. Since I had absolutely no plans to leave the house that day, Lucinda's makeup was more of an experiment than a necessity for me. So soon after she finished her manipulations with brushes and palettes, I went to the bathroom to wash off my makeup, feeling strangely relieved to return to my usual image. At the same time, Lucinda packed her things and, glancing at her phone, said that she had to go, but I held her for a moment and offered her a cup of tea before leaving, gesturing to the living room, where there was already a tray of snacks that I had prepared in advance. "You're always in such a hurry, Lucinda," I said with a slight smile, hiding my inner tension behind it. Let's at least sit for a while. The tea is already getting cold. She hesitated, but, apparently, not wanting to seem impolite, nevertheless agreed, put her bulky bag next to the chair and, sitting down at the table, began to stir sugar in a cup with a spoon, chatting with her parents about something insignificant. I watched her from the side, trying to remain calm, but my thoughts were already preoccupied with something else. I wanted to make sure that she was really gone before I went to my computer and traced the recording from the camera that I had installed in my room the day before. When Lucinda finally got up after a while, picked up her bag, hugged her parents goodbye, and walked out the door, I had to restrain myself from rushing to the computer right away, waiting until the sound of her footsteps completely disappeared outside the courtyard. Only then did I close the door to my room, turn on the monitor, and, restraining my inner excitement, started recording. What I saw made my heart stop. On the screen, it was clearly visible how Lucinda, left alone in my room, quickly looked around, then deftly opened my makeup bag, sorted through the contents and, without hesitation, imperceptibly slipped several items into her bag: lip gloss, several rarely used nail polishes, foundation, which I used only on special occasions. She was clearly confident that these petty thefts would go unnoticed, because the things she chose weren't something I used on a daily basis. I felt a cold wave of disappointment wash over me. I couldn't believe my eyes. Did she really think she could just come into my house, chat with me and my family with a smile, and then stealthily steal other people's things? My fingers were shaking as I transferred the recording to my smartphone. I needed to save it as proof, but at that moment I didn't even know what to do next. I didn't want a scandal, but it was impossible to leave everything as it was. When I went out into the living room, I found my parents there, and with them my brother, who came to visit after a long absence. He was the first to notice my condition and, frowning, took a step towards me. "Penelope, are you okay?" There was concern in his voice, but before I could answer, he suddenly changed his tone, moving on to another question. "By the way, I heard that Lucinda gave you a makeup lesson today. Look, stop relying on her. You make her feel obligated to come here. Have you ever thought about it?" His words sounded like a blow. I looked at him blankly, trying to process what he had just said. "I'm sorry, what?" I even laughed out of surprise. "Well, yes," my brother shrugged, not noticing my indignation. "She's busy all the time, and you drag her into these lessons." I exhaled sharply, trying to contain my anger. "Wait a minute," I looked him straight in the eye. "I never asked her to come, much less teach me makeup. It was solely her idea." But he just crossed his arms over his chest and snorted in annoyance. "What are you talking about?" His voice sounded impatient. "Lucinda is trying her best to help you get a little bit together because you live in a complete mess." I froze. "In a mess?" I repeated softly, not believing my ears. But he didn't notice my reaction and continued without letting me get in a word. "My parents told me that you spend all day sitting at your computer, that your closet is full of expensive clothes and cosmetics more than Lucinda herself. And where do you get the money for all this, huh? You work from home, so you steal from your parents?" I involuntarily clenched my fists, feeling rage boiling up inside. Are you serious now?" There was a hint of anger in my voice, but he didn't even seem to notice. "We can't let you control things anymore," he continued with the confidence he'd had since childhood. "That's why we take over the household." His words hit me like a bolt out of the blue. Did he really think that I was just playing on the computer all day? That I'm not working, but spending other people's money? That Lucinda is a caring mentor, and I'm a worthless sister in need of care? My body tensed, and my head was buzzing with emotion. When my parents returned home, I didn't waste a second. I immediately told them everything I had just heard from my brother, hoping that they would help him see the truth. But their reaction was strange. They didn't respond immediately, as if digesting the information, and I noticed concern in their eyes, as if they had already thought about something like this before. I wasn't going to back down. Everything that was happening seemed absurd and unfair to me, but perhaps the most depressing thing was that my own parents were in no hurry to take my side or at least express some objective point of view. They were silent when Aiden uttered insults, when he put me on the same level as slackers, when he refused to even try to understand what I was really doing. Their indifference was worse than any words. "I haven't dropped out of society," I said, looking my brother straight in the eye, holding back the tremor in my voice, "and I'm certainly not going to let you talk to me like that. If you don't understand that working from home can be no less productive and profitable than any office activity, that doesn't make you right." But he just snorted, as if I'd said something stupid. "Oh, of course you're making money." He crossed his arms over his chest, giving me a mocking look. "Then where did you get the money for expensive clothes and cosmetics? Probably, your parents are generous with their help, since you stay at home and do nothing." I clenched my fists tighter, but I didn't let myself flare up. "I'm like you. I know how to manage my finances," I replied calmly. "My job allows me to provide for myself. Or do you really think that modern companies exist only in offices, and remote work is a myth?" "Whatever your myth is," he interrupted, not even bothering to think about my words, "no one in this house cares about it anymore." I felt my insides tighten at his contempt. "Okay, since you don't believe that I earn money, then perhaps you will be surprised by the fact that the furniture and household appliances that appeared here after your departure were bought with my money." Aiden opened his mouth, about to say something, but stopped, looked at his parents. "Is that true?" "What is it?" he asked incredulously. Dad awkwardly scratched the back of his head, and Mom, avoiding looking into my eyes, muttered faintly, "Yes, Penelope really bought a lot. So I have the right to take what belongs to me." I spoke calmly, but everything inside me was boiling. Aiden looked stunned, and even Lucinda, who had remained surprisingly silent up to this point, frowned slightly, obviously not expecting this turn of events. "You're not going to take everything out right now, are you?" "What is it?" he asked with a hint of annoyance. "No, but I'll find a place to take it," I replied confidently. I turned around, leaving him in the living room, and headed to my room to start packing. Soon I wrote to several friends who could help me with transportation, and began looking for housing options, realizing that now I had no choice. I would have to leave the house that had once been my home, even if it hurt me to realize it. Aiden turned to our parents in disbelief, his eyebrows furrowed, as if he had just heard something completely unbelievable that did not fit into his idea of reality. He didn't understand how I, in his opinion, a stay-at-home slacker, was able to purchase all this furniture and household appliances, while he, a man without a normal job, did not know about it. He waited for an explanation, but to his obvious annoyance, his parents didn't seem to be taking the situation as seriously as he was. "Oh, if Penelope is called tidy, and you, Aiden, are the one who earns more," my father calmly remarked, "then if her furniture and household appliances disappear, we'll just buy new ones, right?" "Yes, and finally let's get that massage chair that we've been wanting for a long time," Mom added enthusiastically, as if it wasn't about a serious conversation, but about pleasant purchases that could be treated with ease and even joy. I watched this scene from the stairs, watching as Aiden's jaw tightened slightly, realizing that his parents were taking things much more calmly than he had expected. It even seemed to me that for a moment he lost the thread of the conversation, because, apparently, he expected a completely different reaction, perhaps support, indignation, accusations against me. But the parents just shrugged their shoulders, making it clear that they didn't care, because they had him, Aiden, who, of course, would sort everything out. I couldn't help but smile to myself. They have always been like this. They preferred not to delve into financial issues, not to talk about difficulties, not to admit difficulties. It seemed to them that if they just continued to live with ease and smiles, the problems would resolve themselves. That's why Aiden, who kept bringing up the topics of expenses and income, caused them unconscious irritation. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to analyze it. They didn't want to think about it. "We're calm because you're here, Aiden," Mom said with a smile, and I saw my brother grimace slightly. I took advantage of the moment to end phone conversations with people who agreed to help me with the move before anyone started a new round of unnecessary conversations. The next day, I was going to move into my new apartment, not too spacious, but cozy, ideal for work and a comfortable life without constant intrusion into my personal space. I made an appointment with several friends in advance, including one who owned a shipping company, and he agreed to help without any questions, especially now that it was off-peak season, which meant the movers could give me enough time to make everything go smoothly. When the truck pulled up to the house, and several pairs of strong hands began carefully carrying out boxes, furniture, and appliances, Aiden and Lucinda stood aside, obviously still not fully realizing what was happening. They were used to the idea that I was here forever, that I would always be a part of this house, but now a completely different reality was unfolding before their eyes. I was leaving them with their parents, with their future plans, with their ideas about how life should be arranged. I watched the movers work together, methodically, without missing a single thing that was supposed to go with me. They checked every room, looked into cupboards, lifted boxes of documents, loaded household appliances into the car, and as the house emptied, I felt myself becoming more free with every passing moment. When everything was ready, my friend, who came to help, smiled and asked, "Penelope, do you mind if we head straight to your new apartment?" I nodded gratefully, feeling a little tired in my voice, but at the same time, a strange joy. "Of course," I replied, "and thank you for your help." "Come on," he waved his hand. "You said you wanted to create a new work environment, and I promised to help." Lucinda, who had remained silent until then, suddenly raised her head, her eyes widening at the realization that seemed to have just come to her. "You're a writer," she said suddenly, looking at me curiously. I was a little surprised, but I nodded anyway. "Yes," I replied. She looked at my friend and added, "Is he your editor?" I nodded again, seeing no point in denying the obvious. Lucinda opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something else, but then changed her mind. It seemed to me that this discovery stunned her a little, perhaps because in her head I had always been just a girl sitting at home, a person without ambitions, without aspirations, without a real job. And now everything was suddenly coming together: my income, expensive clothes, a stable life without anyone's help. I'd been planning a move for a long time, I confessed, allowing myself to say for the first time what I'd been thinking over the past few weeks. I needed a space where I could work in silence, where no one would enter my room without permission, would not take my things, would not question my choice. I looked at Aiden and Lucinda, and oddly enough, for the first time in a long time, I felt calm instead of annoyed with them. "You've made the decision to move here," I continued, speaking more to Lucinda than to my brother. "And I'm glad that now my parents will have someone to help." She blinked in confusion, not immediately understanding what exactly I meant. "My parents have a pension," I reminded him. "And their love of gambling." Lucinda flinched, shifting her gaze to Aiden. He seemed to understand everything instantly. I didn't say another word. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. I turned around and headed for the car, leaving this house, my past life, and everything connected to it behind. I wasn't going to tell anyone where I lived now, because just the thought that Lucinda, my thieving sister-in-law, might one day knock on my door with a fake smile on her face, causing pity or pretending that nothing had happened, disgusted me. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I wasn't going to let people back into my life who had allowed themselves to treat me as if I was something superfluous in their comfortable worldview. Oh, and by the way, this house was registered in my name, so now I could do whatever I wanted with it. I continued to speak calmly, watching Aiden, Lucinda, and my parents exchange glances with each other, until I finally pulled out my smartphone, opened the desired file with a few finger movements, and turned the screen slightly in their direction, starting recording. "I think there's something you should see," I said evenly. In the video, filmed with a hidden camera, Lucinda confidently walked around my room easily and casually opened a makeup bag, sorted through the contents, as if choosing what exactly to take, and then casually, as if casually, slipped several tubes into her bag, casting quick glances over her shoulder to make sure that no one was watching. The silence that followed was almost palpable. Lucinda was paling by the second, her lips were trembling slightly, and her eyes darted around the faces of others, as if she was looking for at least the slightest support, at least a hint of justification, but neither Aiden nor my parents rushed to help. They looked at her, and if she had been perfect, caring, and almost holy to them before, now there was a cold condemnation in their gazes. It's not what it seems," Aiden stammered, as if he had suddenly lost all his confidence. "It's just. Penelope has always been so neat, and suddenly she has expensive cosmetics and clothes. I thought I was doing her a favor by taking it." I laughed, shaking my head. "A favor?" I repeated, looking at him in disbelief. "You call stealing a favor?" But he wasn't listening anymore. He looked back at Lucinda, his jaw tightening and his voice getting colder. "You didn't tell me you took her things," he said through gritted teeth. I just," Lucinda searched frantically for words, but couldn't come up with anything meaningful. I shrugged, feeling strangely but pleasantly relieved. "Well, I think this is the right moment to cut all ties," I said, putting my phone in my pocket. With that, I turned around and headed for the car, where my editor was already waiting for me, sitting at the wheel. As I got into the passenger seat and slammed the door, I glanced briefly in the side mirror. Aiden and Lucinda were standing in the driveway, arguing furiously, their voices getting louder, and their parents were trying to calm them down. I knew that if they started a fight right here in front of the house, the neighbors would definitely notice, and I didn't care. Before we left, I took out my phone, opened my contact list, and blocked the numbers of the whole family. I didn't need to hear their apologies, excuses, or attempts to blame me for everything. It's been a few months. My life has changed, and it has changed for the better. Now I was living in a comfortable home, working without too much pressure, focusing on writing, meeting people who really respected me and my choices. One day, during an autograph session where I was presenting my new book, a familiar but unrecognizable figure appeared in the crowd. It was Lucinda, thin, emaciated, dressed in the very clothes she had stolen from me, and her nails were still covered with the same varnish that had once accidentally ended up in her bag. She stopped in front of me, her lips trembling and her eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "I need help." I stared at her for a long time, thinking about her words, but inside I already knew the answer. "I'm sorry too," I said firmly, "but I do not know anyone by that name." Without taking any things or words from her, I turned around and left. Later, I learned from friends that after the sale of the house, my parents, Aiden and Lucinda, continued to live together, but the financial stability they had hoped for quickly deteriorated. His parents returned to their extravagant spending money as easily as they always did, and Aiden's income was not enough to support them all. When the tension in the family became unbearable, they began to take out their anger on Aiden and Lucinda. In the end, Lucinda was forced to take a job to make up for the rising costs. Her days were filled with endless responsibilities, and the children she might have dreamed of were now out of the question. I only heard about their problems in fits and starts, but it didn't concern me anymore. I was no longer a part of their world. Now I was living my life, free, calm, happy,